All right. So for our next speakers, I would like to introduce Léon Adato. He's a developer relation advocate. It's been speaking, blogging, creating content in the monitoring and observability space for almost a decade now, and he's here today with us to talk about technical empathy.
Very good. Yes. Thank you very much. And before I get into the real conversation, I just want to thank, first of all, the organizers again for having a loud, obnoxious American come up on the stage. I really appreciate. Thank you so much. First time in Montreal, very wonderful. Although whoever designed Peel Street going, whoever thought that was a good idea, going up that steep hill, that was not a great design choice. And we're actually going to talk about that here. The story begins way back in 2001, when I was building it begins in 2000. Oh, I have to use that one. Okay. Okay. The story doesn't begin yet. It will begin in a moment. Yeah? No? That's not it. We are still waiting. This is all about good design and testing. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay. Thank you. Round of applause for the engineers and the video team. They don't get enough appreciation because they make everything else work here. Okay, so way back in 2001, it's hard to think back that far, I was building a monitoring solution for Nestle. And at that point, they decided that I should move to the world headquarters, which was in Switzerland. This was pretty good for me because it was in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. I grew up, my grandmother spoke to me in French. I took French in school. It was less good for my wife. She grew up she was born in Spain. She has two brothers from Colombia. She grew up in a house speaking Spanish, but I didn't realize exactly how hard it was going to be for her until she decided one day to come meet me for lunch. So she got in the car, she got on the freeway, and I get a phone call. And she says, I think I missed the exit. What was it called? And I said, oh, no problem. It's called Sheb. Sheb. Easy. A few minutes later, I get a phone call. She sounds a little more annoyed. I think I missed the exit again. What was it called? Sheb. Okay. A few minutes later, I get a phone call. I can hear the children in the back. They're getting anxious. My wife is definitely upset. And she says, no, really, what was the name? Then it dawned on me. I know that we are all familiar with the fact that languages have rules and exceptions. The problem is that Spanish has rules and exceptions, but French, as many of you here are aware, have rules and exceptions. For the 4 Americans in the room, it's the same as Java and Perl. I am not trying to say that French is the spoken language version of Perl. I'm also not saying that. Anyway, back to the story. I had said Sheb in my head. Sheb, easy, right? That's what my wife was seeing. C-H-E-X-B-R-E-S. Sheb. Sheb. So I'd like to talk to you today about something that Aisha was talking about earlier, empathy, specifically technical empathy, because that day I learned something very important about literally putting myself in the driver's seat. Because if I didn't do that, I was liable to make really bad design choices and have an incredibly uncomfortable lunch with my wife. So, okay, my name's Leon Adato. I'm a middle-aged white guy giving a conference talk. That's all you need to know, except that you can find me as @Leon Adato on almost every social media platform. Also, I picked that picture to give you confidence that I knew what the hell I'm talking about. More importantly, you need to know that this is an oyster talk. Now, what I mean by that is when an oyster, I have 25 minutes. In that time, about all I can do is irritate you. Now, when an oyster becomes irritated, it does one of two things. It either creates a beautiful pearl or it dies. I sincerely hope I do not irritate you to death, but I thought it was friendly of me to just warn you it could happen. Instead, what I hope is that I give you just the grain of an idea that you will then layer over with your own experiences until what you have is something that is polished and unique and valuable to you. So, again, that day I discovered that making bad design choices can have unintended impacts. Now, the problem is that engineers believe that they know what things are supposed to look like. And they really solidly understand that. And yet, it leaves us as users frustrated and annoyed and sometimes horrified. And that can happen whether you're talking about elevator buttons or architecture. It's a real building. Or operating systems. Anybody here remember Microsoft Bob? It was a nightmare. That's an actual operating system. Or cars. Just for clarity, that is a steering wheel on the outside. There are 4 different kinds of buttons. There's a stick shift. There's a push pin thing. This is a 1972 Maserati Boomerang. If you needed more proof that they did a lot of coke in the 70s, right? This is, or street signs, bad design of street signs. This is in San Francisco, because of course it is. I don't know about you, my ass will never touch that furniture, but who decided to jam every single thing all together in that? I don't know. But for some reason, elevators. I mean, like, how do you mess up an elevator panel this badly? Not only did you mess up this elevator panel, but you put an instruction sheet that showed a completely messed up other panel that doesn't even match that panel. Like, really? My point isn't that these things are, ugly. They are. But that some engineer in a meeting somewhere really thought that this was the right way to put things together. And a lot of it speaks back to an inability to put yourself in the person's place, the user's place, and understand their experience. So let's talk about, first of all, empathy. Empathy gets a bad rap in tech because it's like touchy-feely, it offends our Vulcan sensibilities, and all of that. And the dictionary definition doesn't do much to really tell us what it's supposed to be about. So I'm going to take my own swing at it. Empathy is different than sympathy. Sympathy is feeling the same thing someone else feels and agreeing with them. Empathy is understanding what they're feeling, is being able to see things from their perspective. All right? We might feel sympathy, but we share empathy. Now, unfortunately, in tech, we sometimes get both sympathy and empathy wrong, and spectacularly wrong. We ask empathetic questions about purely technical things, like, does this sorting algorithm fill you with joy? Or we try to be sympathetic, and yet we sound insensitive. And I have heard this in meetings from real people. So technical empathy is the ability to see a design or solution from the user's point of view and understand how their experience will be impacted. So let's start off with accessibility. because honestly, that's where we should all start off every day. Every design, every time we go to build something, we should have accessibility in mind first and foremost. I will accept if you say it's second right after security, but really we should start off. Now, I'm not going to go over all this for two reasons. One, I'm not an expert in accessible design, and two, I only have 25 minutes. However, everything that's on a screen should be accessible to be read by a screen reader. Every image should have alt text associated with it. Every video should have closed captions on it. Every time you use a color that is an indicator of something, it should have a colorblind equivalent. And to the limit of your ability and your budget, you should be able to localize the language choices within the application, not rely on the operating system or the browser to do that. Now, if your sphincter is tightening up, just thinking about going back to the office and asking for this, you have just identified your first and largest anti-pattern. Also, if you think you're going to go back to the office and start to talk about these things, and what you're going to hear back is, well, that's a lot of work. I don't know if there's really enough demand. Well, fuck you, there is. There are 430 million significantly hearing impaired or deaf people in the world, about 3.5 million here in Canada alone. Receptive language disorders on top of deaf or hard of hearing, 2 million adults in the US, that's 100,000 in Canada. 245 million people have significant visual impairment, not just they need glasses, significant visual impairment, and 1.5 million here. Colorblind, we talked about that earlier. 350 million people worldwide suffer from significant color blindness, 2.6 million here. And finally, neurodiverse people. There are 1.2 billion people who process information differently than a neurotypical person, 6.2 million. You want to tell me there's not enough demand? That's demand. You build your application to help, to accommodate, to enable those folks. That's an audience that is not being reached right now. Overall, 15% of the world population, 1.17 billion people, have some disability. And if you hear, because I know you would never say it, but if you hear someone say, well, but I'm not disabled, no, you're just not disabled yet. All of us in our lifetimes will experience a significant disability. To pretend that those things aren't a lived reality for people is the height of hubris. Which brings me to the next section, assumptions. Let's face it, we are human. We make assumptions. We make a lot of them. We are also in tech here, and so we have a whole host of other cognitive disassociations that other people don't have, okay? In fact, if you Google falsehoods that programmers believe, you can spend like days there laughing and then crying because it's all true. There's just a lot of things that we think. As an example of a technical assumption, it's one thing to assume that my accounting in my accounting package, the people using my accounting program understand basic accounting. That's an assumption. It is entirely a different thing to assume that they speak English, or they see the way that I do, or that they process information the way that I do. That is a completely different assumption, but it goes beyond that. Okay, we make assumptions about names, all right? First name, last name, okay, all good. Yeah, there's a person named William Test. Wait till he gets into your system. Or Christopher Null. John Wyndham Parks, Lucas Bainham Harris goes sometimes by John Bainham, sometimes by Lucas Parks, sometimes by John Wyndham. Which name is he going to put in there today? You don't know. You also haven't allowed him to put his name in. J.R.R. Tolkien, close to my heart. Okay, J.R.R. is not his first name. Peter Vandermeer, same thing. Which is the middle name? How do I do that? And finally, that last one, that's my name. Except the first name is on the right. The last name is on the left. But if I put it into a normal system like that, on every single piece of paper, it's going to show up backward. The point isn't that assumptions are bad, but you have to know what you're doing. You have to build systems not believing, not assuming that the whole world handles names the same way that we do. It goes beyond that. Time. Samoa, 2011. December 29th, that's a Thursday, was followed immediately by Saturday, December 31st. There was nothing in between. A day in Unix epoch time is always 86,400 seconds, except when there are leap seconds or negative leap seconds that happen intermittently. If you want to know why your Unix admin drinks a lot, that's why. We always think that time zones are whole numbers. No, India Standard Time, 5.5 hours after UTC. Yeah. Okay? So we think that time works in a particular way. I don't know what drugs they were taking when they drew the international dateline, but they weren't sharing with me. Like, why? Why did you do that? Okay? But as designers, we have to deal with this. We have to make sure we're not assuming the time works in a particular way that it does not. This is why your mail carrier drinks. Okay, these are all real addresses. 0 Edgemont Road. It can be a 0. It can be a negative number, -1 Priority Road. It might not have numbers at all. When you ask for a number, some places don't have them. My favorite, apartment 001 is in the same building as apartment 1, just a different floor. And the last one is amazing. Town of Gondal, Street 26, Building 95. Okay? All right? My point is, again, that when you're designing systems, something as simple as getting an address, you have to know that the entire world, the entire base of users are probably not operating under the same set of assumptions as you are. But we're in tech. There's a whole host of assumptions that we make that don't even come into like normal form fills and things like that. For example, if I know it, it must be simple, and everyone else knows it too. No, that is not true. Also, we can learn everything we need to know by looking at the data. Now, one of my favorites, my experience is both complete and definitive. This is the white man assumption, right? No, every engineer on Earth thinks that. Every engineer on Earth is wrong. The senior dev must know something I know. How many of you are senior devs? Okay, few hands. Afterward, over drinks, ask them, do they know something you don't know? They probably do not. If we solve 10% of the problem, we can fix the rest as we build it, right? I think we all in this room have experienced this, and we know that's not true. Users know, this is the talk from yesterday. Users know our jargon, our internal code words, our special definitions for industry standard terms. No, nobody knows what the Gefrinkle project is. Oh, I'm sorry, whoops. Yeah, that's right, I forgot. The blessed MTTI, if you've never heard this term, is mean time to innocence. Wasn't me. Okay? The blessed MTTI of git blame. Who did that code? So we make assumptions about things as IT people that are just patently not true. And the point isn't that assumptions are bad. The point is that you cannot fix them if you don't know you're making them. So ask yourself, really think about whether or not these things are true. Okay. Asking the right questions. Or as one of my friends from Elastic, Serena Cho, she's one of the project managers, said, don't sit in a room smelling your own farts. Ask questions, not just questions, but the right questions. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist, Dr. Isidore Isaac Rabi, said, it was my mother that made me a scientist. When I was growing up in Brooklyn, every other Jewish mother would say, so new? Did you learn anything today? Not my mother. No. I would come home, she'd say, Izzy, did you ask good questions today? And that difference, asking good questions, is what made me a scientist. We have to ask questions. Now, this is a lot. It's hard to read. I'm not going over every single one. These slides are available on my GitHub repo, again, at Leon Adato, if you want them. However, I want to point out the most important element. Even if you are the lead engineer, even if you wrote every line of code, even if you inscribed every bit of data into the database using a magnet on the platter itself, you know nothing. The user is the expert. The user is the person who will tell you what you need to know. I will also point out that the second to last bullet, before I share what it is, what this is supposed to do, I'd like to hear what you expect. You hear an incredible amount of insights. when you ask the user up front, what do you think is about to happen? Now, in the background, you may be thinking, why would you think that? But it's okay. That is what they're thinking. This is a Johari window. A lot of us, when we actually get a user into the room, we will ask them questions that consciously or unconsciously try to validate the upper left corner. Known to me, known to others. Don't. That's not where the value of working with users is. What you want is that all of your questions should drive down and to the right. Always. That is where you're going to find out the things that you didn't know you didn't know. There we go. Asking questions the right way. I know this is a little bit hard. It feels maybe a little PC, a little woke, but if you ask questions the wrong way, you are unintentionally biasing the user and you're losing valuable opportunities. For example, is that helpful? They've done something. Is that helpful? You think it's neutral? No, it's not. Is it helpful means they have to say no, and they don't want to disappoint you. So instead, you could ask, how do you use this today? How is that working for you today? Was that easy for you? Again, there's an unconscious bias in that question. Instead, if you ask, how do you feel? How do you feel about what you just did? Do you like ABC better than XYZ? Again, there's a bias implicit in that. Instead, just compare it. Tell me what you think about that. Do you think that was good? No. So when you think about the thing you just did, and like I said earlier, if you're looking at a screen and they say, well, I don't know what's supposed to happen here, your first reaction as an engineer, your first reaction as a designer is to say, well, it's going to work like this, right? You're just looking at wireframes. Instead, say, before we go into it, how would you expect this to work? You hear a lot of stuff. And then after, then you can ask them, it would actually work like this. Now, what are your thoughts about that? You can ask questions about how to understand things, okay? Can you give me a specific example is better. It's more open than saying, is an easy way to say, tell me more about this. I didn't know that, thanks for sharing. Always validate their experiences. But more importantly, users can, as engineers, we often focus on the how. How am I going to make it do this? How am I going to code this? How am I going to integrate these two things? But users aren't there to tell us how. They're there to tell us what they want to do and why they want to do it. Why do you want that? How would that help you get your work done? Are more valuable questions to ask users than how would that work? Okay? There's other types of questions. I'm not going to go through these. Again, the point is that the users, if you aren't involved today with your UX and UI teams, your UX researchers, tomorrow is an amazing day to reach out to them and start to work with them because they interact with users in a completely different way. They think about the tool in a completely different way. They allow you as the developer and designer to build things that actually solve problems. And you should be involved in those conversations in really meaningful, deep ways, even if it is simply sitting silently in the back of the room listening. Okay, so the unnecessary summarization of this. One of my friends, Joseph Breitreiter, an amazing, gifted UX designer, said, I'm constantly having to correct engineers. They tell me, well, we have to do it like this because users are stupid. Okay, you might have thought that yourself sometimes. Users aren't stupid. They don't care about your product. It's like interface 37 that they have to use in their day. And if you make it difficult to use your stuff, they won't. They'll go find something else. They're not stupid. They are working in their own situation of high cognitive load. We talk here at DevOps Days and among ourselves about the cognitive load we have building things, but they also, the user has a high cognitive load. 95% of their brain power goes to holding a complex model of the work they're trying to achieve. You get 5%, whether you like it or not. They aren't stupid, they're tired. They just want to finish the task that they need to do and go on to the next task or go to lunch or go home or get on with their life. Technical empathy is getting out of the user's way when they're trying to accomplish a task to get work done for themselves. Technical empathy is identifying and removing the friction that makes a challenging process easier for them. And how do we do that? Again, we assume the user is the expert and that we know absolutely nothing, and we break that only when it will create rapport. It will create a closeness that will allow the user to tell us more about their experiences. But unless that's the case, we are not the expert even if we wrote every line. If we don't do that, we end up with a nightmare landscape of poor design choices. All right, you actually made it to the end. Congratulations. As a free gift, free as in puppies, free as in beer, not as in puppies, if you know that phrase. If you scan that QR code, we will send you this AC/DC logoed TCP/IP hat, completely free, no shipping, nothing. You can do that. This slide will come back, don't worry. But if you are feeling irritated, I did warn you, that might happen. And if that's what you're feeling right now, it's time to take that grain of an idea that I've hopefully given you and begin to layer it over with your own ideas. In the meanwhile, I am ready for your questions. Thank you very much. Let me have it. Come on, bring it. No? No, everyone's busy getting the QR code for the hat. Like, I don't want to raise my hand. I got to get the hat. Yes.
Oh, thank you for that. That was pretty insightful. One question I have is dealing with users. I like the way that you put it, that they are experts. But I also find it challenging sometimes where I deal with users who don't exactly know what they want, right? And that opens up the floor for so much, because sometimes they want everything, and you can't do everything. So how do you, go about that?
So again, I think that the key is when a user wants everything, and also I want a pony, and I want it to be this particular color of chartreuse, usually it's because you've somehow involved them in the how. Like, how would I do this? Which functions do you need? That's a question that an engineer has to think about. Instead, if you can pivot to, what are you trying to accomplish in your day? When you open my tool, when you open this application, what is it that you want to do? That's it. Forget about tools. I actually don't care if you're talking about this tool. Just, you sit down at your desk, you want to get something done, tell me about your day. Tell me about your work. If they ask for a particular function, and it's weird, okay, then a good question, a good place to start is, how would that help you? Or also, why is that important to you? Why is that necessary to your process? Tell me more about your process. Either they will realize that the pony function is not actually critically important to getting the accounting out, or because it seemed like a really neat idea. Or users also get caught up in it's exciting to talk to an engineer. It's exciting to talk to somebody who could actually change the program, and sometimes they get caught up and they did you know what would be cool? Oh my gosh, if we made it vibrate up and down 5 times, whatever. They come up with all sorts of ideas. So the sound guy hates me now. So they've gotten caught up in the how. They've gotten caught up in this blue sky thinking. And so bring them back down to, what is it you're trying to do? What's the work? When you open this application, your thought is that you want to do what? And that usually brings them down to something that's more usable or functional. Or you understand that your application has either been sold wrong or people completely misunderstand what it's trying to do, which also is a thing. Any other thoughts? Once again, you can find me as Leon Adato on all social media. I'm also going to be around. Thank you all again.